Hey everyone, welcome to the Millionaire Lineup Review. My name is Max Steinberg. Tonight we are going to go over the Week 2 winning lineups for the DraftKings Millionaire Maker and the FanDuel Sunday Million. So, I'm not going to bore you with any more of an introduction. I think we should just get right into it. And we're going to start with DraftKings and the Millionaire Maker. A player who goes by the handle Tim Woodbury10, congratulations, won the Millionaire Maker, and I don't think he's a pro, but he did have a savvy lineup that I really, really love, and a couple of really low-end plays that pop out at me and maybe surprise some of you and surprise me a little bit, but I think they're really solid plays, and I'm just going to get into it right now. So CJ Anderson, someone might look at this and say, like, man, how the hell were you supposed to know the CJ Anderson's going to go off? It doesn't really pop out as play. He is at home. Running backs at home do tend to do better. And running backs are kind of like a game flow type of thing. Like, if your team's going to be in the lead, the matchup doesn't matter as much as just, like, having a game where you get to run it a lot. And also being a talented player helps, which CJ Anderson is. But I think the important thing with Anderson, and something that people miss, is he's not a sexy play, but he is really great value at only 4,700, and I think he was certainly a viable play. I didn't use him as much as I probably quote-unquote should have. I liked a lot of running backs today a lot, but I think he was a really sneaky under-the-radar play just because there was nothing that really popped, and when there's nothing that really pops, people tend to overlook him, players like that, and the ownership kind of gets depressed. So when you see values like this from guys who are sort of established guys who you can sort of count on to have a big game every once in a while, I like throwing them into the Millionaire Maker lineup. So I think this was a really smart play. As for some of the other plays, Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski was like a pretty standard stack. New England had just a sick matchup. I think Brady was one of the top two quarterbacks for me on the slate. I would say Aaron Rodgers I had ahead of him, but maybe barely. And Gronk obviously had a great matchup. He's priced up, but he is Rob Gronkowski, and he did not disappoint. He actually got injured in the third quarter. Kareem Hunt, I would have been not a believer early this season, but there's a guy I listen to. I love this podcast, by the way, and I recommend listening to it. The Pro Football Focus Fantasy Podcast with Jeff Ratcliffe. The guy is really smart, great as sort of like a scout if you don't really watch the games or know what to look for. He loved this guy, Kareem Hunt, and he has just looked unbelievable this season. So when it comes to a play like this, where it's mostly actually just a talent play, I think that you can rely on people who are smarter than you and know the stuff better. And I think with Hunt, he's clearly is a very talented player, and he's someone that I'm going to continue to look at week to week, and I think you should as well. Rest of the plays, Cardinals D I actually didn't like. They're 4,100, and I think that just the matchup was kind of overrated. Indy with Scott Tolzien at the helm, yeah, they're going to be a really easy team to use the defense against. But with Jacoby Brissett, who runs a bit more, I just didn't really like the play. I think he got kind of lucky here. There's an interception in overtime. Brissett made some mistakes towards the end of the game. They didn't actually pass it that much. I'm not a fan of this play, but it worked out. Especially using it with J.J. Nelson. I think with receivers, you don't really want to use them with your defense. And the defense didn't even do well. It just ended up working out because you just smashed on everything else. J.J. Nelson, this is just certainly an opportunity thing. And it's cool to look at snap counts, and I'm not going to get it up, but you need to make sure that you have some sort of thing that has snap counts that you look at week to week. Because J.J. Nelson's a skilled player who didn't play that many snaps in week one, but with the injury to John Brown, snaps are going to step up. It's a great matchup versus the Colts, so I think he was a very smart play. And Jermaine Kearse, and Keenan Allen was shock, obviously, but Jermaine Kearse is the one I really want to talk about because he's actually some guy I used a little bit. And I don't mean that to say as a brag because obviously I didn't win this week, but I think Kearse was a cool play that I just want to talk about because I'm surprised he got such a low ownership. I thought that he was a better play than that, and here's why. So one thing is, what I love about this is from my website, DailyFantasyWinners, is our sportsbook projections. One thing to look at is just pass point share or pass percentage. And with the Jets, they are a huge underdog. Their projected score 15 points, but they're 13-point underdog. So they're likely going to pass it a decent amount. I know the Jets are a running team. And by the way, these numbers are sort of based on last year. And the Jets do have a new offensive coordinator, and they did pass more in week 1. So I expected them to pass more than 60%. And I thought Kearse was a decent play because of that, because targets really matter, especially on DraftKings. This is NFL Savant, by the way. Free site. It's a great site for red zone targets and looking at targets from week to week. Jermaine Kearse led his team in targets last week. He wasn't even on the team until a week left in the preseason. So this was a pretty impressive number. And one thing I really like, and this is another site that's called Sharp Football Stats. I know I'm jumping around, but I really just want to show you all these free tools that you can use to just do your research. One thing I really like about the site is you can look at red zone targets, and it's not just inside the 20. It breaks it down inside the 5, inside the 10, and inside the 20. And inside the 5 targets for wide receivers, according to, it looks like this is being weird. I'll just go back to here. Hold on one second. But inside the 5 targets, according to this article that I read on Predictive Football, another really great site, by the way, are actually the targets that really translate into high numbers of fantasy points. So I like looking at the site and looking for the guys who are getting those targets inside the 5, and lo and behold, Jermaine Kearse did have a target inside the 5 last week. So those are going to add to some points. So we have a guy who's actually turns out to be the number 1 receiver on the team. They're going to pass a lot. We've seen that he's going to be targeted a lot. I thought it was an interesting play, and I really didn't buy that the Jets, and this is just my interpretation, but I just didn't buy they're going to score 15 points. I read an article early in the year about how the Jets offense was just absolutely ridiculously stupid. They were just throwing it deep all the time, and they fired their offense coordinator, hired a guy from the Saints. And so I'm not surprised that their offense seems to be moving it a little better this year. So yeah, I really like that Jermaine Kearse play. And if you watch my videos last year, you can see in the Millionaire Maker, it's really important to use some punt wide receivers, because the punt wide receivers, these guys who are under 4K or both these guys are actually under 4K. If you can find guys like this who can have games like this, like over 20 points, that is going to go a long way for you winning the Millionaire Maker, because you also need to have guys like Brady Gronk. You need these high-priced guys who are going to Keenan Allen's a shock, Ty Montgomery. You need these guys who are going to go off. And if it weren't for these two, there's no way you can afford this Brady Gronk stack. And this is basically what made his lineup. So congratulations to Tim Woodbury. Great lineup. I really love the Kearse play. Let's just move on to FanDuel. So this is Sunday Million. And what we have here is a guy named Cependolino, who I hope I'm pronouncing this right. And he also had a Tom Brady Gronk stack. I mean, this was the stack to own. And on FanDuel, the strategy is going to be a little different, because on FanDuel, the salaries don't have such a huge range. They don't price up the high-priced guys that much. And so you're sort of going to be able to afford more, and you don't actually need to punt that much at wide receiver. And I think it uses kind of a different strategy, and since it's not PPR. So I think with this lineup, we have JJ Nelson again, Chris Hogan. There's nothing here that really stands out. He has Devonta Freeman, but he could have very well used someone like Gurley or Melvin Gordon, been totally fine here. The one thing that stands out here is he did use Michael Crabtree. And I think with this, one thing to consider is just the fact that people who are overreacting to week 1 and just valuing a little too much what happened, because Amari Cooper obviously led the team in targets. He had 3 red zone targets. I think he had 3 targets inside the 5, which is fantastic, right? This is like perfect. if someone's going to have that, well, I can't get this up, but basically, or you get red zone targets right here. So 14 targets for Cooper, 4 red zone targets. Michael Crabtree gets done, but keep in mind that's just one game. So don't make like drastic changes to everything just because of one game. And I think a lot of people did that here, thinking I actually did as well. I'm like, oh, Cooper's the man. This guy's a young stud, blah, blah, blah. Crabtree's getting older, blah, blah, blah. But what turns out what happens is everyone goes on Cooper in a fantastic matchup, and not enough people are in Crabtree, and suddenly he has 3 touchdowns. He's getting the red zone targets. So I guess I would just say that with Crabtree, just don't be too reactionary to what actually happens in week 1. Look at, okay, with this, does Crabtree look like bad? Does it look like there's something wrong? No. Is he playing 100% of snaps or close to 100% of snaps? He's probably playing 80%. Yeah, okay. So if you see something like this, don't just suddenly go all out on Cooper and just completely ignore a guy like Crabtree. So, again, you know, some weeks there's really interesting lineups. Some weeks there aren't. I wouldn't say these lineups, in terms of the way they're constructed, is that interesting. He did do a Brady, Hogan, Gronkowski stack. I think doing double stacks on FanDuel especially is a really cool thing because there are sort of stronger correlations. Because on DraftKings, for example, like Keenan Allen, he scored 22 points. He didn't even score a touchdown. That's not going to happen on FanDuel because without the PPR and bonuses, you need touchdowns to win. So guys like Brady, Hogan, and Gronk are going to be more correlated. If Brady throws a TD to both Hogan and Gronk, then he's going to be in for a really huge game, and that correlation is going to really help. However, in this, if he used Hogan as well, his points are going to be a little limited because unless Brady throws it like 50 times, which he might have in this game. But you're going to be able to make up for it with a guy who gets a lot of receptions like Keenan Allen or Jarvis Landry or someone like that. So in the end, I mean, this lineup is good. I like the Ravens D pick against Cleveland, picking against rookie QBs. Smart idea. Kyrie Santos is fine as well. So some good lineups here. I will look up last week as well. This is a guy named Rubes who won it last week. And there's not, and since I didn't do a video, I might as well go over it. But there's not a lot that stands out here, aside from the fact that this lineup is not chalky at all. And the chalk did so terribly in week 1. One interesting thing is punting a tight end, I do think is a kind of a cool idea because with tight end, they are guys who can get multiple touchdowns in a game. I would have way rather stacked these two with Ben Roethlisberger. I think that would have been a much better idea. But I do like the tight end punt with Jesse James. I'm surprised he did that well. Jaguars D, again, against a rookie quarterback. They're on the road, or actually this wasn't against a rookie quarterback, but the Jags D, I think, is going to be real good this year. And yeah, he just managed to not have a terrible lineup. He didn't stack here. I think that's really bad. But it was such a weird week that it ended up working out. And to that point, actually, I just want to say that, you know, just because someone did something that won doesn't mean that their lineup construction is optimal. I think there's obviously a lot of luck in these things, but if you do construct your lineups optimally, like starting with actually stacking, which is very important, especially in FanDuel, I think that's going to maximize your chances of winning. But it doesn't mean it's impossible to win. And then here's week 1. Again, this is the lineup that actually did have chalk at tight end. Tariq Cohen was really interesting. This guy basically called Tariq Cohen before Tariq Cohen blew up, which is pretty amazing. But I do want to illustrate the point is, with a guy like Cohen, I sort of view this as like a punt wide receiver because he's a guy who can catch a lot of balls. So if you are going to do a running back punt like this, and it's not like the most smash play ever, like some injury that to a really great running team and they're the only running back available or something like that. But if you're going to do a punt running back like this, make sure it's a guy who's going to catch a lot of balls because those guys can build the fantasy points really quickly. So yeah, I would say, you know, what did we learn from this week? A little bit. I hope that you learned something just watching along with me. I think that in the end, with DraftKings and FanDuel, the strategies are different, and the lineups that won the past 2 weeks aren't necessarily optimal, but have some optimal stuff. And overall, I would say DraftKings, I've seen this as a theme over and over again. You have to have the good punt wide receiver. If you don't have 1 or 2 punt wide receivers that do well, you're probably not going to win. So keep that in mind when you're making your DraftKings Millionaire Maker lineups. And on FanDuel, I encourage the double stack. There's not really a salary structure thing here that I would really encourage. I think you don't actually have to punt as much as you do on DraftKings, so the salaries just aren't that wide. And yeah, do a stack, do what you like, pick some good contrarian plays that might go off, the JJ Nelson, the Michael Crabtrees, and who knows, you might win. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions, comments, you can tweet me at Max J. Steinberg. You can post on the Daily Fantasy Winners forums. And you'll be seeing me do this every week from here on out for the rest of the season. So goodbye, everybody.